Welcome to PACE, Performance Assessment Contributions and Effectiveness, Value-Added Assessment for Speech-Language Pathologists. My name is Joanne Wishman. My background is speech-language pathology in the schools. For the last 14 years, I've been an administrator in the schools with a focus on provision of quality special ed services, including speech and language services. My current job is Executive Director of Special Education in a school district in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. Disclosures for this session include financial compensation for course development and that I do work as the Executive Director of Special Ed. Non-financial disclosures are that I am the Chair of the ASHA School Issues Advisory Committee, Chair of the Texas, which is TISHA, Ethical Practices Committee, and a member of the TISHA School Advisory Joint Committee. Let's begin this training by providing a little history behind value-added assessment for measuring employee performance. Value-added assessments were developed due to No Child Left Behind requiring states to implement standardized assessments to evaluate school performance. Even though No Child Left Behind has been replaced with Every Student Succeeds Act, better known as ESSA, the practices that were in place under No Child Left Behind still remain. The development and the use of value-added assessment is based on the assumption that the assessment data proves credible information to measure the effectiveness of schools and the staff who teach the students. Whether your personal belief is that this is an accurate way to measure school effectiveness or not is a moot point. The fact is that many states have adopted a value-added appraisal system. At least a portion of the teacher and the staff appraisal is based on annual growth or gains in student performance on the state assessment. The use of a value-added appraisal assessment system with school-based SLPs presents many challenges. One example is that the appraiser looks at the annual growth on state assessment for students on the SLP's caseload. The growth rate would already put the SLP at a disadvantage given that all of the students on his or her caseload are identified with special education disabilities, whereas the classroom teacher teaches a class made up of students with or without disabilities. Another example of a challenge that value-added assessment presents for speech-language pathologists is that speech-language pathologists only work with his or her students for a very small portion of the day or the work week, whereas teachers have a considerable more amount of time with students as they educate their students throughout the entire school day. We could discuss the pros and cons of value-added assessments for the entire length of the training, but it is more important for us to spend time highlighting an alternative to the traditional value-added assessment. In order for administrators to adequately appraise your job performance in the schools, it's necessary to begin with a brief highlight of the roles and responsibilities of the school-based SLP. Hopefully, you are aware of this one-page document that summarizes the roles and responsibilities of school-based SLPs. This tool is a valuable tool for educating others as well as ourselves on the full scope of what we do in the schools. This summary document is based on a much more extensive document by the same title that was published by ASHA in 2010. We will briefly look at the 4 areas of responsibilities as a segue into the appraising of the school-based SLPs. The first area references the critical roles that you provide. As you can see, these critical roles define the overarching services that you provide by stating that we work across all levels with a wide variety of disorders and that our services must link to the curriculum. The second area focuses on collaboration that school SLPs provide. The collaboration refers to the various groups and is listed as a critical skill to ensure generalization of communication skill across settings and across communication partners. This collaboration could occur with general ed teachers, with special ed teachers, related service staff, as well as the parents. The third area of responsibilities is leadership. Often the responsibilities listed here and the responsibilities in the area of collaboration from the previous slide are activities that take time, but they are not well reflected in the average speech-language pathologist's weekly schedule. For many SLPs, these responsibilities end up being completed after hours, or we simply do not do a good job of providing these services. Our intentions are good, but actually squeezing it in is the challenge. The fourth area focuses on the range of responsibilities that school SLPs do. Some of the items listed on this slide are the areas that most of our time is dedicated to. For example, most people recognize that we provide intervention and therapy. We complete assessments, and we complete compliance paperwork, and we sit in a lot of meetings. This area of responsibility often is the area that appraisers focus on when conducting the job appraisal. Consequently, this is also the area that most people think that this is the only thing we do. So remembering the other three sections and scheduling those responsibilities is absolutely critical. Today we will highlight an appraisal tool that ASHA developed in order to help schools document and appraise the full scope of responsibilities of school-based SLPs. The Performance Assessment of Contributions and Effectiveness, known as PACE, was developed by ASHA staff members in collaboration with school-based SLPs and administrators. The PACE is comprised of several tools that can be used in part or in full to measure the effectiveness of school-based SLPs. The PACE toolkit contains all of the instructions and the various documents used in PACE. There is a step-by-step guide which outlines the timeline of events for using the PACE. The matrix, which is based on the ASHA Roles and Responsibilities document, also will be reviewed in the next few slides. The self-reflection tool is for the SLP to reflect on his or her own skills in order to determine areas of focus and to develop professional goals. The PACE observation form is the form the appraiser uses to document their observations on 3 different visits during the school year. The PACE also includes checklists that are used by parents, students, and/or staff in order to gain their perspective on the performance of the SLP. Again, the PACE is designed with flexibility in mind. Therefore, the PACE tools may be used in part or in whole. All of the PACE documents and information regarding the development of PACE, as well as advocacy information, is available on the ASHA website free of charge. PACE was developed with 9 guiding principles which translate into performance indicators or objectives. The first indicator is demonstrates knowledge and skills in speech-language pathology and related subject areas such as literacy and implement services in an ethical manner. That's probably the one we all think of as far as our everyday work. But additionally, the second one is provide culturally and educationally appropriate services that are effective, engage students, and reflect evidence-based practices. The third one, in partnership with a team, determine eligibility and recommend services that are compliant with state and federal regulations for children with IEPs. The fourth one is demonstrate ability to conduct appropriate comprehensive evaluations for students with a variety of communication disorders. Number 5, use appropriate and dynamic service delivery methods consistent with a wide variety of individual student needs. Number 6, collaborate with classroom teachers and other professionals to serve the needs of students in both general ed and special education. Number 7, collaborate with families and provide opportunities for them to be involved in their students' speech-language pathology services. Number 8, earn continuing education or professional development credits sufficient to meet ASHA requirements for certification maintenance, as well as your state certification or licensing requirements. And lastly, number 9, contribute to the various building and/or district initiatives. So let's begin with our actual case study. We will review an example of the PACE being used with a campus-based SLP. It is recommended that at the beginning of the school year, the evaluator and the speech-language pathologist review all of the components of the PACE so that everyone has an understanding of what to expect. As part of the review process, they will discuss developing a portfolio, developing a professional learning plan, and selecting approximately 5 case files for review during the school year. During the first 9 weeks of school, the first observation should be completed using the PACE observation form, and the portfolio should be started and compiled throughout the school year. Here you will see an example of the observation form. The form is designed for the appraiser to make notes as needed to document their observations. As you can imagine, while an appraiser is observing, there's a lot of activity going on in the room. So therefore, use this document to scribe comments that are made by the speech-language pathologist or the children, or both, as well as describe what you see as you're watching during the observation. During the course of the school year, the appraiser will complete a total of 3 observations. Zooming in, you can see some of the notes or comments that the appraiser took during these 3 observation dates. Here's an example comment. For the indicator area, explains contents of the assessment clearly, the appraiser wrote, Nancy clearly explained the assessment to those in the IEP meeting. Or another example is, for the indicator, responds appropriately to questions and comments of others. The appraiser wrote, Nancy seeks the input from others. The SLP self-reflection tool is a rating scale for the SLP to rate his or herself on the 9 performance objectives. The SLP also can use this document to write comments to support or clarify his or her own ratings. The self-reflection tool is then used in combination with the other PACE documents to develop professional goals. In our case study, the SLP made notes of areas she wanted to grow in and gave comments of justification. For example, here you'll see that she wrote, even though I feel like I have proficient skills linking therapy to academic standards, I'd like to be more proficient in this area. From this, then she would write a professional goal and plan out activities of learning that will help her develop this professional skill area. Here's an example of the classroom teacher checklist. Taking a closer look, you see the various activities are listed, and the teacher simply checks yes or no, but also provides feedback of his or her experience with the speech-language pathologist. The matrix for portfolio assessment is the form where the appraiser pulls all of the various data sources together in a summary fashion. The information is recorded by performance objective. You can also see examples of portfolio items that align with the 9 indicators. For example, for the indicator on developing knowledge and skills in speech-language pathology, an item that might be put in the portfolio would be certificates of completed professional development. For cultural competence, evidence that might be added there would be maybe a survey from the parent or a teacher that gives support of evidence on cultural competence. Each local school district or state will need to define the evaluation rating scale, as ASHA does not define the rating scale for you. So prior to using PACE, the district or state should determine the evaluation rating scale. Typically, a 3 or 5 point Likert scale is recommended. The center point should be equivalent to proficient. Typically, speech-language pathologists struggle with being proficient, but we need to know that's where the expectation is. So training is advisable so that expectations are clear from the beginning on all sides for every party. Continuing with the matrix and zooming in on the document, you will see that the appraiser checked off items that he or she observed or items that he or she saw in the portfolio collection, and then he wrote comments to support and justify the ratings that were given. The PACE is designed in a way that allows the appraiser and the SLP to develop professional development plans based on all of the sources of data in the PACE. For example, a comment was written, Jillian participates in campus professional development and speech professional development. She implements new learning in her therapy. When the appraiser provides feedback to the SLP, it is helpful to begin with positive comments about what they have observed. I really enjoyed watching the lesson on insects and seeing how each student was fully engaged in the lesson. That would be a good starting point. For areas of possible concern, or maybe areas that the appraiser doesn't understand what was happening in the lesson, they might ask a question to clarify. So, for example, I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you were trying to do when you asked Johnny to do whatever it was that he was doing. At this point, it allows the speech-language pathologist to explain the technique or the strategy that was being used to target that goal. The appraiser may or may not be familiar with speech and language services. Therefore, they may not know if that is an appropriate strategy to use with the student. So this gives the speech-language pathologist the opportunity to respond with an explanation. And then the appraiser may respond with, well, now that makes sense. I was just unsure of how to scaffold as you were shaping the R sound. I just knew it didn't sound right. The appraiser might suggest something like, well, have you considered explaining to the child what you are doing or trying to achieve? And by asking that question, then the speech-language pathologist can engage in open dialogue with the appraiser to explain what her typical protocol is for explaining what students are working on as far as their own individual goals. Our second little case study we will do is for a diagnostic speech-language pathologist. In some districts, they have positions for speech-language pathologists who are responsible exclusively for assessment. They may be serving on preschool assessment teams or autism assessment teams, which are multidisciplinary teams along with speech-language pathologists, maybe a school diagnostician if your state has educational diagnosticians, or licensed school specialists in psychology. And then your other related service staff may be a part of that team as well, such as occupational therapists or physical therapists. What you see here is an observation protocol, which is very similar to the campus-based SLP, but it is tailored to the roles and responsibilities of a diagnostic SLP. As you can imagine, they've removed some of the items that are directly linked to therapy, given that this diagnostic speech-language pathologist is only focusing on assessment, the collaboration process with the other assessment partners, and working with the student and the family to review the assessments as well as write the reports. So zooming in a little bit, you will see the quality indicators and the notes that were written by the appraiser. On the matrix for the diagnostic SLP, the appraiser transfers the information from the observation protocol, the portfolio assessment, and the surveys to summarize all of the information. Here's an example complement that was written. Nancy is amazing with students with behavior challenges. She is able to enter into their world and calm them down. I really like how you don't give up on the child and just say they're untestable. So zooming in on the matrix, you can see the performance objectives, examples of the portfolio items, and the observational evidence. Here's a portion of a parent checklist for a diagnostic speech-language pathologist. The parent simply checks yes or no to items listed and adds comments as they wish. The PACE contains checklists for use with parents, teachers, and/or students as appropriate. These checklists may be used as appropriate to gain feedback and input from the various perspectives on the performance of the speech-language pathologist. Remember, these various components of the PACE are available and may be used in part or in whole. An example of the feedback from a parent is, Mrs. Smith took extra time with me to help me understand the evaluation report. If you are interested in using the PACE in your local district or state, here are some recommendations for advocacy. Begin by identifying the proper district administrator to discuss the use of PACE in your local school district. This varies from district to district and state to state. In some districts, campus administrators have the flexibility and authority to select the appraisal instrument for use with staff. In some districts, the appraisal instrument must be vetted and approved by the Board of Trustees or possibly even other agencies. It is important to find out how this works in your local school district. The campus administrator may not hold the authority to make this decision. However, it is beneficial to have a conversation or discussion with the campus administrator before you approach district-level administration. It is advisable to respect the chain of command whenever you are advocating for anything in your school district. Sometimes this is simply a matter of discussing with them and getting their perspective just so they're aware of what you're wanting to do, and they may give you advice on how to accomplish that. That discussion may actually yield a more favorable outcome. As you develop your strategy for advocating for the use of PACE, review the district's strategic objectives and mission plan. It's always advisable and more likely to be well received if you can link your advocacy efforts to a strategic objective or to the district mission statement. The purpose of a school district is to educate students. So from the district administrator perspective, or even a campus administrator perspective, speech and language therapy is one small part of the whole process of educating students. And quite honestly, that priority may not fall as high as you would rank the priority. Therefore, it is critical when you're advocating to focus on the benefits of speech therapy for students and how therapy supports the academic gains for students. Here are some questions you may want to consider as you prepare for advocacy. What are the most important aspects of education in my district? Is it the performance on state assessment? Is it performance on college and career readiness? Or what is that focus on? Another question might be, how does speech and language therapy support the most important aspect of education from the district perspective? So do you have evidence that supports your answer, such as data that would show how your students have performed, or documentation of how your students have progressed over time? Or do you have a specific student example that you can use as part of your advocacy efforts? Once you have your thoughts together that support student achievement and college and career readiness, then ask yourself, what is the benefit to the appraiser? Remember, you're trying to sell this to someone else. So potential answers might be, the PACE addresses all of the roles and responsibilities of the school speech-language pathologist in a quick and easy way to measure all of those various performance indicators. Another potential answer is the PACE allows the administrator to collaboratively develop a professional development plan within a continuous improvement model for that speech-language pathologist. Once you have your talking points organized, schedule a meeting with a person or group of people that you have identified for your conversation. Be respectful of their busy schedules by arriving on time and staying on topic. It is advisable to take copies of your talking points, which, remember, those are the benefits for them and for the students, and copies of the ASHA roles and responsibilities of school-based SLPs. The one-page document is the best one to take for each person in the meeting. Take this as an opportunity to educate the district leaders on what you do on behalf of students and to support student educational growth. It is also advisable to minimize any self-serving benefits or language that would indicate that you are there for a self-serving initiative. For example, rather than saying that this will help me out by you appraising me on what I do on a daily basis, it would be better to word it, the use of the PACE will allow us to look at the quality of therapy and the indirect supports that help students gain academic growth. It is also advisable to avoid wording or nonverbal communication that sounds like complaining, or accusing the district of not being concerned, or not thinking that speech and language services are as important as you or I might think they are. So carefully planning your talking points prior to the meeting is critical. If you find that the district cannot allow the use of PACE, explore an option of a locally developed appraisal tool, modifying the current tool, or possibly adopting parts of the PACE that would augment the current appraisal tool. In some states, the state determines the tool, so if you can get them to buy into you augmenting the tool with some portions of the PACE, you have made progress in being appraised in all of your areas of expertise. So at a minimum, the outcome of advocacy for the use of PACE allows an opportunity for you to educate others on your roles and responsibilities in the school. In summary, the goal of performance assessments is to provide feedback to employees on their performance and how their performance facilitates academic gains for students. The use of the performance assessment tool, such as the PACE, allows the appraiser to provide feedback on the aspects of the roles and responsibilities of the school-based speech-language pathologist. Equally important, PACE allows for the appraisal and the SLP to develop a professional growth plan within a continuous improvement model. Our hope is that this case study reviewing the ASHA PACE, a value-added assessment for speech-language pathologists, has been beneficial. In closing, this slide lists the resources available for your use as you consider implementing the PACE in your local district or your state. This presentation addresses facets of the ASHA's 8 strategic objectives. You can learn more about the objectives and the 7 other objectives by going to the webpage noted at the bottom of this slide. Thank you for completing this case study, and I hope you use the PACE.